Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We're recording in the Richie Beto commentary box this week at the Oval, which is nice. It's a nice change of scenery.
Bit cosy though.
It is, yeah.
Too cosy.
We're slightly close together than we normally would be, but I think it's good for sort of team spirit and that sort of thing.
No, it's not. Joe's propped his laptop up on a bin.
That's true. You won't be able
Don't
to
let
see
them
that
behind the
here on
curtain, Phil.
YouTube.
It's not sensible.
Right. We will cover everything else that's gone on in the world of cricket in the past week. But this is mostly going to be our State of the 100 special, looking at the competition from all angles as it completes its second year. We've got a chat with Darren Stevens, giving the view of the county pro from outside the competition. Lauren Winfield-Hill, opener for the actually invincible Oval Invincibles, joins the show as well. And we've got a pod debut for ESPNcricinfo's Matt Roller, who might well have watched more of the 100 than anyone else in the world. Matt, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm less well, having heard that claim to fame. I don't want that to be my only selling point. But if that's the role I've got to play, I'll play it.
No, yeah, an all-rounder, far from being a T20 specialist.
But he is also the doyen of the 100. We played a game last week for the cricket writers, and everybody just defers to you, Chief. So that is your legacy, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, that was why Dean Wilson whipped me off after a single set.
Yeah, indeed, a set as well. Even the lingo, very nice.
Also on the panel, as I'm sure you've already become aware, are Wisden Cricket Monthly magazine editor and editor-in-chief Joe Harman and Phil Walker. We'll come to the 100 in a bit, but let's start with England's T20 World Cup squad. And I spoke to Mark Butcher about that and the England-South Africa series decider, which will start at the Oval on Thursday.
Mark, England's T20 World Cup squad was announced on Friday, with the headline initially that Jason Roy's been left out. Was that the right move, do you think? And what comes next for Roy as an international cricketer?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. There's so many things bubbling around that decision. On the face of it, it's probably the right one, I guess, given his struggles with form. Also, you start to look at the World Cup squad and think there's an enormous deficit in terms of tournament experience now that there is to be no Morgan. Of course, when they left out Jason Roy, they didn't know that the Johnny Bairstow news hadn't broken as yet, so they can't sort of be Nostradamus about things like that. Josh Buttler has an injury; he'll be back for sure. Ben Stokes comes back in, having not played any sort of short form cricket. All of a sudden, it starts to look a little bit sort of shaky at the top of the order. England have lots of options, but they don't have tournament-hardened, proven options aplenty as they might well have done. So it's interesting. It also throws up that the interesting sort of difference between the form of Jason Roy being a sort of a droppable offence, somebody who has an enormous amount of credit in the bank in terms of what he's done in major tournaments. And then you look across the water at the Test match side, where a lack of form doesn't seem to make any difference whatsoever. So the messaging on the outside, anyway, you don't know what's going on inside or behind closed doors, but on the outside, the messaging seems a little bit muddled. You've also got, I suppose, the spectre of Alex Hales in the background, and given the complete decimation of England's sort of top order explosive options, surely it's time for what some might say, surely it's time for pragmatism to start reigning, and to bring in a guy who's in wonderful form, has played all around the world, and is frankly terrifying to opposition bowling attacks. And I suppose the onus would be on, with Morgan no longer there, a new management set up to decide whether or not they can let bygones be bygones and allow him back in. But so I mean, it's interesting that they look down the rest of the squad. I mean, Buttler himself is injured at the moment. Livingston is injured. Wood and Wokes, both in the World Cup squad, played no cricket all year, both still injured. Jordan is injured. Even in the reserves, Tamal Mills is injured. It looks a little bit sort of 90s like in terms of the portents for a recipe for disaster. Of course, there's a little while to go. Do have the Pakistan series to kind of flush some things out, and also to give 5 uncapped players a chance to stake a claim to maybe to move up if some of those players don't make it in terms of their fitness. But it's not an ideal place to be, and it's a stark reminder also of the idea of having sort of like 4-year cycles and sort of having the plans begin. Professional sport being what it is, you can make all of these plans, but they can be undone at the final hour by injuries. The interesting thing in this case for England is that the injuries and the lack of form and all of these things have been there front and centre for a very long time. So the only contingency that England have in order to try and do something about that, should those favoured players not make it back, is the Pakistan series coming up, which is important for 1,000 reasons. Not least because we've not been there for 16 years or something. But also now because it becomes absolutely desperate stakes for a lot of players to stake their claim of fitness, to get to find some form, and to give Josh Butler some kind of confidence going into that Cricket World Cup that he's got somewhere close to something that he would have liked at the start of his captaincy.
Yeah, I want to ask you more about Hales in a second, but just first on Bairstow, who later that same day that the World Cup squad was announced, it was announced that he was been ruled out of the tournament due to a freak accident whilst playing golf. The reports in the media that he slipped over while walking to a tee box, and Bairstow said on Instagram that he'll need surgery. I mean, before we get to how England actually replace him, it's just a massive loss, not just for England, but for the tournament, really, isn't it?
Yeah, for the tournament, for the Test match coming up. I mean, it's great for Harry Brook, because you're thinking he should be in there. He should be in the team, but given the way that he's playing and how the word ceiling is something that seems to be used quite a lot. Well, he has quite a high one as far as I can see. So great news for him. But yeah, I mean, for the tournament, like I said, it kind of throws all the plans into disarray. You could say, again, going back to the idea that there's some hypocrisy involved in terms of leaving out one player for form and leaving in another player for form or lack of, or whatever it might be. But I suppose you could say with leaving out Jason Roy that England had that position at the top of the order covered. They had a lot more options perhaps than they might think that they have in terms of options at the top of the order in the Test match team. However, you remove Bairstow from that, who's been batting at number 4 in the T20 side. He's been moved up to take Jason Roy's place, and suddenly he's gone as well. And then all of a sudden, like, whoa, hang on, we're much shorter than we thought we were going to be. I know how it can happen. Out in the golf course, that's part of the reason why the old boys used to wear metal spikes, because there are all kinds of dangerous inclines, and if you're not paying attention properly, you can come a cropper. But it's such a shocking thing to happen to him when he is arguably in the form of his life and enjoying cricket as he never has done before. So just on a personal level for Johnny, we wish him well, and very sad that we won't be seeing him smash it all over the place in SE11 on Thursday.
Yeah, and then on Hales, so Key in the press conference when the squad was announced said that he was discussed a lot, that he feels he served his time, but they just felt he wasn't the best option in the squad from a cricket point of view, basically. From your point of view, do you think he is, if you take away everything else, just purely from a cricket point of view, is he the next best T20 opener in the country, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Phil Salt has come on leaps and bounds, and so when the door of opportunity closes for Bairstow, it opens for Salt, and I'm sure he'll do a terrific job because I think he's wonderfully talented. But again, in terms of you're going into a world tournament, you've got best bowlers, best batters in the world slugging it out. If you're taking the new ball for whoever it might be, whoever England's opponents might be in the group stages of the competition, I think you'd be quite happy not bowling at Alex Hales and bowling at a relatively inexperienced youngster like Phil Salt. So, I mean, look, I think that's been the case for a very long time. It's not just now. It's we've always known that the reasons that he is not playing for England at the moment go beyond what he does on the field. But sometimes needs must. And as I said, you've got a totally new management group who can kind of make their own decisions. They shouldn't be beholden to decisions that are made in the past. But maybe maybe it's the whole thing is just too horrendous to contemplate, and that's the end of it. In which case, there's not much else anybody else can do about it, is there?
Yeah. How much does that kind of matter? If you know what I mean, like how much is the makeup of a squad and how much everyone likes each other? Does that make a team better at cricket? Is it something that is important, or is it something that we think players, even if they don't get on with each other, they should be able to put that aside when they get onto the field and do their job, basically?
It's the argument with Kevin Peterson. It was the argument with Jeffrey Boycott. It's been the argument with players through the ages as to whether they're divisive or not. I tend to think that in tournament play, you want the best players you can possibly lay your hands on. And so really, it doesn't matter. Try and put the best team out there that you possibly can. And the analogy that I used at the time with Kevin, I think, was that it's not a club team. It's not. Oh, we're not gonna sign this bloke from whatever club it was because nobody likes him and the wives don't get on or whatever it might be. It's not. It's not a sort of social club on Saturdays. It's a tournament that needs winning. And so, look, I have every respect for them sticking to their guns and saying, no, he's not our guy. What was done was unforgivable, and that's the end of it. I think to swerve away from that and say that enough on cricketing reasons or he's not the right fit on cricketing reasons is being a little bit disingenuous.
Fair enough. You mentioned Brooke, who is likely to come into the middle order in the Test match. What should we sort of expect from him as a player, do you think?
Well, I think he kind of fits the mould entirely in terms of what England or how England want to play and how they want to go about imposing themselves on Test matches. He's just wonderfully talented. I saw him for the first time in New Zealand down in Queenstown when he was captain of the England under-19s. I think he was relieved of the captaincy for their last game in the tournament for a breach of curfew. So he's a man after my own heart. But I just think he's a fabulous player. I really do. And he's wonderfully confident. And number 5 is kind of the perfect fit for him as well. So I suppose that the one worry that you have is that sort of like the purple patch that he was in seems like it was quite a long time ago now, although he did make a brilliant 100 against South Africa representing the Lions before the series started. So it seems as though the break from red ball cricket hasn't done him any harm. But that form doesn't stick around forever, and that you just hope that he's still got that same swagger and the same confidence going into the Test match, and that England don't find themselves 30 for 3. Although it worked for KP, didn't it, back in 2005, being in early and imposing yourself early. But I think he's sort of technically there are very few holes to pick in him from what I've seen. He's a pretty orthodox player. But obviously has all the bells and whistles of the modern batter as well. So very exciting. He's truly talented lad, and I wish him all the best.
Yeah, and which way do you see that final Test heading? I mean, both games have been pretty one-sided so far. Do England have the momentum, or is that too simplistic given how long there's been between the two games? The fact that both of them have been decided pretty much by tea on the first day.
No, well, if anything has been proven by the first 2 Test matches, that momentum is the biggest load of bunkum in the world. One side gets hammered by an innings, and then the next side gets hammered by an innings. The toss, I think, might be vital, not because of the surface, but the decision made on day one. I think both teams will be erring towards sticking the other side in. I mean, the weather around is not likely to be great. The Oval pitch looks like I was there. What day are we now? I was there Friday, and it looks, the whole ground looks in fabulous nick, and the pitch looks like it might have a bit of pace and bounce in it. And I just think that both teams are much stronger in bowling than they are batting, and so you want to try and get the leg up early in the Test match, and then control it from there. I think England showed, and England's approach with the bat showed that given the opportunity to kind of eke out as many runs as you think you need to win the game in whatever fashion will win you that match, that they're quite happy to do that. And I was unbelievably pleased to see them do it, because it mature, it was sensible, it was Test match batting. And if you end up knocking a side over for 150 and find yourself in a position where you can put 200 on that sort of lead first innings, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, there's so much time left in the game to then go about winning it. And the other side is you've got to give your bowlers a chance to recover, and that's another thing that I think England sides in the recent past under Joe Root were awful at doing. They might find themselves in a great position, having bowled a team out cheaply, but then went out and kind of squandered that, and their bowlers were back out in the middle again, and it's no wonder they're all injured, is it? Although they're slightly unrelated things. But you know what I'm saying. You've got to play the game. You've got to play the game over the course of the length of time that there is available to you. And having your gun bowling attack back out on the park, having managed to rack up the sum total of 40 overs with the bat, is not doing anybody any favours. Certainly not Jimmy Anderson's mood, anyway.
Cheers, Butch. Thanks very much for your time.
I discussed England's T20 World Cup squad with Mark, but just to run through it very quickly, it's Butler, Milan, Stokes, Livingston, Brooke, Salt, Moeen, Curran, Rashid, Topley, Wood, Wokes, Willie Jordan, and then a mystery 15th player, with Bairstow's replacement not yet named. Is that a squad good enough to win the tournament?
I think it is, in that I think if you look at recent T20 World Cups, there's quite a lot of randomness that goes on. You look at Australia in the last one, and I think they're fifth most recent T20 World Cup game. They got absolutely obliterated by England in Dubai. And leading into that tournament, they got hammered by Bangladesh and West Indies in some bilateral series. So I think in terms of the fact that weird stuff happens during T20 World Cups, and if you win 4 games in a row, that can be enough. In that sense, I think it is. I also think that they will go into the group, which has Australia and New Zealand in it as second favourites at best. And I think that the game against New Zealand already is sort of looking like one that will probably determine who goes through to the semis. I think we've probably got quite used to England going into World Cups in the past couple of years, or ICC events, with one of the strongest squads, and I'm not necessarily sure that you'd say the same on paper this year, but it is still a good squad, I think, if not a brilliant one. Bowling looks light, doesn't it?
So that's the area where you don't think they're quite as strong as they were a year or two ago?
Yeah, and I think also, obviously, the batting, it is a huge thing to have lost effectively two of your best batters in Jason Roy, whose form's fallen off a cliff, and Johnny Bairstow, who's out with the freak injury that who knows how it was sustained. Depends whether you believe viral WhatsApp voice notes or not.
I think we stay clear of that.
But yeah, they effectively lost two of the people you would have said were their best batters a couple of years ago.
And it's a great shame, obviously, that Jofra won't be able to take that new ball out there on those pitches as well. That's a glaring loss.
It's the seam attack for me, which has been an area of weakness for a while anyway, and now feels even weaker. Wood and Wokes feel like punts at this stage, given they've not played all summer. You could argue that Reece Topley is England's most important seamer going into this World Cup. He's a really good bowler and he's had a really good form recently, but that's not a position you want to be in, really, given that he's not that experienced and he's not world class at this stage. Yeah, I feel actually quite slightly gloomy about their prospects, really. I think the Pakistan series will be fascinating to watch, and it's a great thing it's happening, but I'm not sure it's the greatest warm-up for them, really. I think given it's a sort of almost second-string side in some senses, I think they can get beaten quite heavily, which is never good preparation for a world tournament.
So no Wood, no Wokes in Pakistan, or do they join for the second half?
They should be available for the latter, but no Jordan, no Livingston, no Stokes. Pakistan, no Butler for the first bit as well.
Right, and so those three, they're not playing at all?
Which three?
Livingston, Stokes,
and Jordan. Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Blimey.
And then I think the departure of Morgan feels sort of almost more significant with every passing day, really, in that there was that sense that the white ball setup almost looked after itself, that it didn't really matter who the coach or captain was because Morgan had set this template in place. It feels like that has disappeared quite quickly. Roy's form has not helped. Suddenly the side has changed a lot. Just feels a bit hodgepodge, and I agree, I think they could still win it. They've got the players to do so. But if they do, I think it's going to be more through individual brilliance than a kind of clearly coherent plan, which is what England's white ball cricket has been based around over the last few years.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to take someone having a really good comp, isn't it? It's going to take Butler having a really good run of form in the knockout stages or something like that, or in the crunch game, someone really steps up.
It is odd, though, isn't it? Because Australia won the thing last time out, having blustered through the early stages. They never really performed coherently as a team.
Never took it that seriously.
Never took it seriously. picked their test team, and Mitchell Marsh had a couple of good days out, and suddenly you've won the World Tournament. So there can be a hell of a lot, and it's all good fun talking in the build-up in the phony war, but T20 cricket in that kind of condensed 2-week winner-takes-all shot at the title kind of tournament, as you say, it is random and it is slightly wild, and there is a kind of irrationality to it as well. So yeah, England could turn up there and be exposed by their, the lack of legs in their pace bowling attack, the lack of depth in their spin bowling options as well. Yeah, Mo and Rash remain the only real persuasive options. They've gone cold on Matt Parkinson. Liam Dawson, as we know, is a kind of cement mixer of a cricketer. And he comes in here and there as per, but wouldn't really cut the mustard. Certainly not out in Australia. But then, if you're looking to be more positive about it, then you have in Salt and Brook two interesting candidates on the bench. You have Livingston, who's this kind of beguiling nutcase that you're in love with, but he could explode at this tournament for sure. You got the best all-round cricketer in the world, albeit with a in and out record, I know, in T20 cricket. But Stokes now comes in at number 4 in the kind of Morgan hinge point slot in the order. You got the best opener in the world in Butler, and so there's a lot of colour and variety and diversity and interest, I think, in this side. Albeit there's no guarantees that it coalesces in the way that you would have been pretty sure that it would have done under Morgan.
Yeah, and a Bairstow-Butler opening partnership, which was what we had for
right,
about 6 hours. You can go into a World Tournament feeling pretty comfortable that one or both are going to come off in most matches. And I like Salt a lot, and I think he should get the chance to open now.
Do you?
But yeah, I think so. I'd put Will Jackson in the squad.
I was surprised that Sorry.
I would go for Salt in the side, but Jackson in the squad.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised that Salt got the nod over Jacks, actually. What do you think, Matthew?
I think Salt, having had the 100 that he had, where he was really dominant at the top of the order, and having obviously played with Butler and he's seen him firsthand, I wasn't too surprised. And I think he sort of feels like he's the guy that's been groomed almost for it for a little bit longer.
Yeah,
than Jacks.
okay. I guess he's got his
got
chops.
those 2 extra years or something of experience, where he's played a few more
time in the
leagues.
middle order as well, hasn't he? It's that he's done his time.
On the middle order as well, just one thing that I picked out was that Ben Stokes is penciled in at number 4. I mean, he might well be a player to move off as well, or Milan could be, but Stokes has never batted at number 4 for England in T20s. He's not really played any T20 cricket in the last, he hasn't played any T20 cricket in the last year. His last game was in the 100 before his break from cricket in 2021. And he last played for England in the format in the March before that, and his overall record in the format isn't great as well. Phil, am I wrong to be thinking this is a bit of a punt England are taking with Stokes? Or should we just trust that he's Ben Stokes and it's a tournament, so he'll turn up?
I think it's a really good slot for him, and I wrote a little thing in the magazine saying this. I think that Stokes has an issue whereby he doesn't hit his first ball for 4. He hits his 4th or 5th ball for 4, and he takes a little bit of time to get going. And I think if he's in there at 5 or 6 in the real finisher slot, then I think you might find that he'd be shortchanged a wee bit. But putting him in at 4 gives him enough time to get a headwind into an innings, and then it becomes a straight equation, and then it becomes, do you have the balls? Do you have the guts? Do you have the brain and the game sense and the nous to find your way home in the pressure cooker of a world tournament? And we know that that's what he's made his name as a cricketer. So I don't have an issue with it. I like it. I think if I was going to pick him in any position in the side, then I would put him at 4. To me, that makes sense.
But why not? What about not taking him to Pakistan?
I think that's silly. But then this is Stokes, who exists on his own plane. Stokes has his own ecosystem around him, and if Stokes says, I don't want to do it, or I need to rest, or I have something else going on, who can say, then all of English cricket bows down. But look, ideally, obviously, you want him there. You want him learning the specific components of that particular role, for sure. And any time England take the field without Ben Stokes in that side is a lesser event and a lesser side. That said, as I say, he kind of adopts his own position in the whole landscape of English cricket, and for whatever reason he won't be there. It is unfortunate though, and I imagine that Butler will be quietly a little bit peeved that he doesn't have his best collection of players going into this world tournament. Obviously, the first one that he's going to be leading out.
So that Pakistan squad includes 5 uncapped players: Will Jacks, Jordan Cox, Ollie Stone, Tom Hellman, Luke Wood. We'll discuss that tour in more detail a bit closer to the time. But Joe, it's striking now that England have available, at least in theory, 5 bowlers capable of getting beyond 90 miles per hour, right? In the Woods, Stone, Gleeson and Mills. That's something, I don't know if they would have ever had that before. It feels at least worth pointing out.
Yeah, and I suppose that has kind of crept up on us, and they wouldn't necessarily have been the names that you'd have picked out a couple of years ago if you had said who are going to be the 90-mile-an-hour England bowlers. They're all pretty raw that you said there. I mean, it's one thing being 90 miles an hour, but in T20, if you don't get it right, that can be a real drawback. On Australian pitches, which will be flat, you'd expect, they could end up being fodder. And this is why I'm not wholly convinced that they have the class there. I think a lot rests on Rashid and Mo. Again, in Australia, that's not going to be.
Can I ask Joe if they are fit, Wood and Wokes? Do you feel more confident? Do you think that they're even the right people to have in that position?
Wood, yeah, I think Wood's definitely got a role to play if he's fit. Wokes, I'm not convinced. He bowled well at the start of that last T20 World Cup and then took some tap right at the end, and he'd done quite well at the IPL, I think, in the lead up, and then lost his place because.
But having not played for England for 6-7 years, something ridiculous.
Yeah,
T20.
I would fear that he'd go the distance in Australia. Really, I mean, obviously, I think he's a fantastic cricketer, but T20 is by a distance his least good format.
A word on Jordan. From what I've seen this summer, I've seen quite a few games.
Bowled really well
for Surrey. Yeah, he's bowling the same pace as he ever has. I
think he's bowling quicker. Honestly,
I think so?
He's touching 91, 92 in a way he never has before. Yeah. I think
he's obviously a natural cricketer, and he's in great shape, and he looks fit. And he's now an elder statesman as well, so he brings that kind of nous to the show as well. I think it could be quite an interesting sort of swan song for Jordan, whose reputation among T20 analysts and experts and nerdsters has kind of gone a little bit up and down, hasn't it, over the last 2 or 3 years? But he looks right in the mix at the moment.
Yeah, he's a very interesting one, isn't he? Because after the last T20 World Cup, you could have seen that semi-final being his last game for England because he's not in the ODI setup, and obviously, his role is bowling at the death, and he got hammered by, was it Neesham and Mitchell?
Yeah.
And that could have been it, but instead he's actually come back and now looks pretty integral, especially when you think of the loss of Roy and Bairstow. He is one of the senior players. It's him and Moeen are basically the sort of 2 vice captains, I suppose, to Buttler.
I was going to say, I think Buttler will lean heavily on him. Morgan's always talked about how important Jordan is to have in his side, even aside from all the different assets he brings as a player. And yeah, I think Butler's going to need some help this winter.
Can I just ask one last question before we move on to you, Matt? Sam Curran, who's hit the ball as cleanly this summer as any player I've seen, is there a way into that 11?
Yeah, I think so.
Where?
I think for me, Sam Curran is as good a number 7 as England have at the moment in terms of a finisher.
So that's where you see him.
It's a tricky one because I think, like a lot of England players, his best role is probably coming in at 3 or 4 and taking down the spinners, rather than a lot of them are ideally would open the batting. I think Sam would ideally bat 3, 4, 5, but I think realistically he's going to come in at 7. But if you look at the other candidates for that role, especially because you're probably going to shuffle some people up, unless obviously it depends who you pick as the Bairstow replacement to an extent. But I think if you're saying who would you rather have as a sort of extra, almost a spare player at number 6 or 7, it's probably going to be Sam Curran rather than, say, Harry Brook, who's still pretty inexperienced as a T20 player.
On to the final England-South Africa Test. Discussed a fair bit with Mark. Harry Brook, like he's coming to the side with Bairstow injured. But Phil, let's start with let's discuss South Africa. They were not very good at Old Trafford. What changes do you think they should make for the Oval? Is that it for Harman, do you think? And for Markram? Van der Dussen is out injured. They've added Wyn Mulder to the squad. How do they replace him? There's a few questions over the sides, isn't there?
Yeah, massively so. I was surprised by their selection. I couldn't believe that they didn't play Jansen after he'd bowled well and batted excellently at Lords. And I mean, I'd underestimated how good he was as a batter for sure before the Test series. But seeing him play at Lords, couldn't believe that they didn't pick him for Old Trafford. I could understand that they wanted to try and get Harman in, who I felt sorry for. And as you know, I know him a little bit, and he's been absolutely desperate. It was a kind of career moment for him to play a Test match in England, and obviously they stunk the place out, bundled out by halfway through the afternoon, and then he had nothing to work with, really. As for this Test match here, they brought, as you say, Wyn Mulder into the side as a sort of seam bowling lower order all-rounder option that could possibly come into play. But I would imagine that they bring Janssen back, possibly if they want to play Harman. And just looking at the pitch, I mean, it's late summer now. It's September time. The sun is still baking down, and it is the Oval.
Albeit thunderstorms last 2 nights.
That is also true, for sure. If they want to keep Harman in, then possibly ENGvSA makes way, who looked a bit leggy, I thought, at Old Trafford. The one for me as well is the keeper, who I had a few concerns about before the start of the series, having watched him over the winter, and he did okay, and he made a Test 100, grounded one out, but he doesn't really convince for me, certainly with the bat. And Ryan Rickleton is their second keeper, and he did really well for Northampton in the build-up to this summer. He's got himself used to English cricket a little bit more. And I think in due course, I think they look away from Verian to another keeper. But then it would be a big call to drop your keeper in the build-up to this final game. However you spin it, and we had this conversation a month ago, however you spin it, it's not quite right for them. The balance isn't quite there. Aidan Markram, who I fancied and talked up, again, always looks good for half an hour and then gets himself out in silly ways. He may well step aside. But it's difficult. And I think they will be kicking themselves at the way that it went at Old Trafford, the selections that they made. I think for sure Janssen has to come back into the setup. And then it's whether they gamble with Harman or stick with ENGvSA, I think.
Matt, I always find it hard previewing tests because you are just shooting in the dark, but how do you see it?
Pissing in the wind.
Basically, yeah. How do you see it panning out? I mean, South Africa weren't great at Old Trafford, England weren't great at Lords. South Africa might be able to pinpoint a few actual mistakes they made, which might make it easier to move on from it. Is this going to be a good game? It's going to be another sort of one-sided game decided on the first day.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, both of those games have been decided within, it felt like a couple of sessions as well, because South Africa tied themselves, and not so much at Old Trafford, by picking the 2 spinners and letting that dictate everything. It was quite reminiscent of England at the Gabba, where you turn up expecting something, you don't get that, but you just stick with the plan anyway, and it goes horribly wrong. I don't know. I hope for the sake of the cricketing summer or whatever that we get a decent decider. I mean, the Oval Test obviously wasn't originally meant to be the decider last year, and the England-India series was a really good one. And they served up a really good pitch, which relied on that brilliant spell by Bumrah to sort of turn the game and decide the game. So I hope we get something like similar to that, where it's slightly higher scoring game. Both sides make runs, and it's not over within a couple of sessions, because much as the Old Trafford Test had good bits, so for example the collapse on the 3rd day, it was pretty much over by the time that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the pitch very briefly, obviously we work out of this ground. We've seen a lot of cricket this year. The pitch is a real triumph for the Oval ground staff, and it's not been that case for much of the last 5-10 years, but the pitch has got pace and bounce. Looking at it now, albeit 2 days out, there's a tiny bit of green on there, but I think it will play as it has played for most of the year, i.e. a top-class cricket pitch, and it will reward good cricketers.
We've had good games, really. Sorry, we've had some stinkers away from home, but the home games have really all been good games, I think.
And there's been quite a lot of nice sort of scoring games as well, where you sort of trade 300 type scores, exactly, and someone wins by 3 wickets at the end, and everyone's in the game. And
I just hope whoever wins the toss, and probably bowls, that being the way of things these days, whoever's inserted, whoever bats first, I hope they just get through to the middle of the afternoon, only 1 or 2 down, and then I think we can settle in for a really good game of cricket. But as you're saying, it can be done almost by lunch at the moment, because top orders are fragile, teams are dominated by their pace attacks. I hope that Elgar's plan, by the way, at Old Trafford was a relatively sound one. Win the toss, take the plunge, hold your nose and bat, and hope that you get a wee bit lucky up to lunch, and then the sun comes out and then you can settle in. So the plan was okay. It just backfired on him because they were 5 down by lunch. Whoever bats first, get to lunch 1 down, then we can settle in, and it could be a humdinger.
On to the Asia Cup, which has been great so far, if hard to follow if you've been in the UK. Sri Lanka have completed big last over chases against Bangladesh and Afghanistan. I don't know if you followed this, but Sri Lanka Bangladesh is basically the Palace Brighton of cricket, in that no one's really sure why it's a rivalry, but it's a really good one.
Did you hear this? Did you hear this, Joe?
I'm not going to explain the Palace-Brighton rivalry on a cricket podcast. I think we'll lose too many viewers. But it's a good comparison.
Yeah. So before this game, you had Sri Lanka's captain Dasun Shanaka saying that Bangladesh are an easier opponent than Afghanistan because they've only got 2 world-class bowlers. And then Bangladesh team director Khalid Mahmood said, at least we've got 2 world-class bowlers. It's the only in Sri Lanka. There have been victory dance in the past and smashed glass doors. It's basically always been great, and I don't think anyone can really work out why there's a lot of needle, but it is good. And then a rivalry.
Anything to do with Terry Venables and Malcolm Allison?
Don't think so. No, I think you think of the India-Pakistan rivalry.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Which was
that time when LTL was in charge, back in the early 90s. Yeah.
Alan Mullery was the...
was it Mullery?
Yeah.
Of course, Mullers.
Anyway, back to the cricket.
There was another really good India-Pakistan game with Pakistan chasing down 182 with a ball to spare. We had runs for Kohli, Rizwan, a match-winning cameo for Mohammad Nawaz. There was tactical intrigue, pivotal drop catches. I think these teams should play each other more often.
That's a good idea, isn't it?
What's really nice as well is how the tournament organisers, they obviously put together a format that was high on competitive. The only thing that mattered was, the integrity of the competition from a cricketing point of view. And they just lucked out that it happens that India-Pakistan have had 3. They could be 3 times in a row if it gets to the final. The prime time Sunday night TV slot.
Who would have seen that? It's almost consistent with those repeated coincidences where they all come out the same hat for every single ICC tournament since 1975. It's odd, that, isn't it? Yeah.
If only there was a way for Pakistan and India to play each other multiple times without having to stage a cricket tournament which involved a whole continent. Fortunately, can't think of a way to do that. The other big piece of news in that competition is that Ravindra Jadeja has got a knee injury that needs surgery, so he might well miss the T20 World Cup, which would be a big blow for India. But we'll discuss that a bit more after the Asia Cup when it looks a bit more clear how India will replace him. And then just to run through quickly the rest of international cricket.
Ryan Burl.
We should spend a bit of time on this actually. Zimbabwe beat Australia in ODI, which is great. Ryan Burl took 5 wickets in 3 overs, which was the fewest overs bowled by anyone in ODI to take 5 wickets. So that was good.
There you go.
Warner hit 94 out of Australia's total of 140 odd, which was the highest percentage of completed of runs in a bowled out ODI innings. So 2
dream
big
game
stats
for you,
there.
Ben,
Yeah,
isn't it? Really?
It was huge. Yeah. And then Zimbabwe chase it down with Thrugs in hand. So it was a really big moment for them. Yeah.
I watched the highlights of this. I got BT with my brother-in-law. Gone halves on it. It's quite expensive, isn't it?
Not specifically to watch the highlights of this.
No, I had no idea it was on, Joe. Okay. But just going through, riding a wave last night, saw it, put them on. 45-minute highlights. They were good. Ryan Burl, my new favourite cricketer. Never heard of him 48 hours ago.
So 15 months ago, Ryan Burl posted on Twitter, basically begging for a sponsor for him and his teammates because they had to glue their shoes together at the end of each series.
Right.
And then I think a sponsor came. I think it was Puma who came through, and now he's taken 5 wickets in 3 overs in a landmark win for Zimbabwe. So that's good. And they, as we've discussed a few times recently in the podcast, they've had a few good results. They pushed India close. They beat Bangladesh in an ODI series. So things looking up a bit there.
Apologies in your roundup of it. Did you mention Aaron Finch?
No, I didn't. Who is under pressure, averaging less than 15
Matthew Roller
this year.
Is he a spent force?
Oh, it's tough, isn't it?
He's been under pressure for about 3 years now, hasn't he?
It reminds you of the two England players in Roy and Morgan, doesn't it? Because he's largely playing T20 cricket, similar to both of them, and therefore it's quite hard to get his form back. And then also he's batting in a team where they bat down. They have sort of Cam Green at number 8, and so he's got to go quite hard. But then the harder he goes, the more likely he is to get out, and it just looks a bit of a problem. I think I was just scrolling Twitter before we recorded, and he had his pad blown off by Bolt today against New Zealand. So another failure there. But he's in the World Cup squad, and he's going to captain them in that tournament. So I think he's got at least another couple of months.
And they'll win it.
I was going to come on to this at the end of the show, but it feels like a good moment to. We had a question from Anik asking, how much cricket do you guys watch? Do you sit there on a February morning watching the Pakistan 4-day domestic competition and the West Indies 1-day cup, or is it strictly just the big international games and county cricket, Phil?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Anik, who are you asking? Because it will vary from person to person. I think you'd say that's fair, Ben.
I think it's probably fair. Yeah,
I read that tweet as well, and the first thing I thought was when I think Yaz said to Taha, or it might have been you actually, a month or so ago, you've been watching quite a lot of Ireland's women's team of late, and then you went on and he had to give chapter and verse on that, and I think that's a bit of a glimpse. But then, yeah, there are different scenarios for different people around this table, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with the best will in the world, I mean, you know the 100's been happening, Joe, right? You are aware of it.
I've actually been watching quite a lot of the 100, Phil, and that will become clear as we talk in depth about the tournament.
Of course. No, yeah.
Maybe not as much as Matt. but
Yeah.
a bit of it.
Okay. Yeah, different levels for different folks, I would say.
Yeah. But if something's on, if there's a game on while I'm working, I'll make sure to have it on. And if there's a player that I want to watch, I think I'll try and seek out.
You're still the bloke in the office who scampers across the floor to show us some little mini controversy from some game in Karnataka or something like that.
Yeah, I can't talk on this, but I did see Ben in the press box at, I think, the Leeds Test earlier this year, sort of dual wielding. I think it was Ranji Trophy final highlights and an Ireland bilateral game.
Yeah, that's Ben.
That'd be the boy.
There might be, probably fair to say, there's a correlation between how long you've worked in cricket and how much cricket you're watching. I think there's probably something in that.
Yeah.
Inverse relationship.
Tim David has been called up for Australia's T20 World Cup squad. He's yet to play a game for them, so it's sort of a Jofra Archer type selection scenario. Matt, tell us about him and how excited we should be.
He's a big boy, isn't he? He's 6'5", I think. Pretty solid guy. Hits straight down the ground, and yeah, it's. I think I've probably only recently woken up to how big a thing it is in Australian cricket, sort of politically. The fact that this guy who doesn't have a state contract and is very much out of the system has sort of been floated in last minute, and I think. People I think there's a certain maybe establishment fear that this could become the new norm where people are turning down national contracts and just doing what Big Tim's doing and sort of taking himself around the world. I think it's probably come at quite a bad time for Tim David because of the fact that he's travelled so much and played so much T20 cricket over the past 18 months or so that I wouldn't be surprised if he turns up for his debut pretty knackered, because I think he's gone Big Bash, PSL, IPL, last 100. Then straight after his last 100 game, he flew to the CPL. Then he's going from the CPL, I think, to India, where they obviously naturally play before the World Cup for some bilateral games, which I think is where he'll debut, and then into a World Cup. And the 100 was the first time he's actually had a quiet series.
I was going to say, my sense was that his form was tailing off.
So, and maybe this is sort of psycho babble, and he's actually fine, and he's going to come roaring back. But I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of that run he's actually quite physically and mentally knackered about the fact he's played so much cricket, even if he's only facing 20 balls an innings.
This taps into a half-baked, maybe quarter-baked, half-assed theory of mine that because of the relentless nature of it, and because of the sameness, say if you take Jason Roy's story, and this notion that you are forever got half a foot on the coach for the next game, wherever that may be, and while there are subtleties and nuances within a T20 game of cricket, there's nonetheless a kind of routine, regulated reality to it, right? You kick off at 6 o'clock every evening, every 2 or 3 nights. You hope to face 25, 30 balls and maybe get to 50, and that's your life. That's the extent of your professional life. That must eat away at your motivation and your psyche and your freshness, right? It must do, because there's no variety, or there's little variety in there. And then so if you fall away, if you go through a bad trot, how do you find the light and shade to get out of it? How do you emerge from that slump when everything reminds you so awfully perfectly of what happened yesterday, and the same thing and the same thing and the same thing? Tim David probably doesn't apply to him at all, but that idea that you are forever on the move, and yet you're moving from something which looks remarkably similar to what you had before, and if so much of getting out of form is visualizing a better way of living, a better fate for yourself, if so much of it is that, and it is because it's all up there, then surely it becomes difficult, right? It must become very challenging for a player when you are on that remorseless, relentless carousel day after day after day after day, and eventually you must just think, sod this for a game of soldiers, And you watch Roy, you see his body language this year. I mean, your heart goes out to him. You'd have to have a heart of stone not to feel for the lad, because he's a very likeable and selfless cricketer. But how do you arrest your way out of that when you are repeating the same horrors day after day after day, like a carbon copy?
Well, it's kind of like a form of bubble life, even outside of the times when people have to be in bubbles.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
But interestingly, Roy did take that break at the start of the year to freshen himself up. So he did step away from it, but it just hasn't worked for him since he's come back. I don't know. Don't know whether the reasons that he stepped away from it are still bothering him now and affecting his form. But But he definitely looks like a cricketer who's just had too much.
Yeah, if you just sort of use the analogy, or not the analogy, the comparison of, and this is not kind of I like red ball cricket at all. It's not. But if you take, say, an opener who tends to feature more in 4-day cricket, 5-day cricket, there's more scope to find a different way through those rough periods of form. You can take a different guard. You can decide not to play a shot until lunch. You can conversely decide to play a few shots before lunch. You can take things in a different way because there's more scope and more variety in there. But if you're Jason Roy, or if you're Tim David, who comes in with an average of 30 balls per innings to go, and you've got to open your shoulders from ball 2, then there's not much scope for variety in there, and so you can end up becoming very funneled, I think, and very, 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 very stuck in that remorselessly repeatable one track. And that must be very challenging, I think, for these players.
Tim David, the player of the tournament, then? Is that what we're going for?
And Aaron Finch, 400 runs, job done.
I like this, the theory that you have to be in as much chaos as possible, or just the right amount of chaos going into the T20 World Cup if you really want to be a contender. That's the only way. Very, very final bit of news before we get into the 100. We just should mention that Colin de Grantham has retired from international cricket. He's got a higher difference in his batting and bowling averages than Ben Stokes in Test cricket, which is impressive. There might be a bit of BBL, NOC stuff involved. He appeared in the draft list for the Big Bash League, and New Zealand cricket was surprised, I think, and then he retired quite soon after that. But he's had a great career, if perhaps not as long as it otherwise might have been, having come into it quite late. So
I saw Kane Williamson was talking around this issue a few days ago regarding Trent Boult, but also with CDG as well. And he's saying, for now, my only focus is New Zealand cricket, but he acknowledges, and he doesn't say much, Kane Williamson, but he said, things are changing very, very quickly. And I thought that was, a key line, but it's a line that we're all acutely aware of, uncomfortably aware of.
Hi, Lauren. Delighted to have you on the show. First things first, congratulations. You must have had a pretty good night on Saturday. What did you and the team get up to after winning the final?
Yeah, we had a great night. To be honest, we were at Lord's for ages afterwards. They looked after us really nicely, had drinks in the long room, and just chatting to all the sort of the other players from the other teams. And then I'm not used to being in the winner's circle, but it's quite nice when you win because you get a bit of an after party arranged for you. So we headed there afterwards and celebrated and sort of caught up with everybody, which was good. And then Dusty head the following day.
Nice one. The team spirit in the camp seemed from the outside really good. You had this sort of unique situation where you had sort of 4 world-class overseas players, meaning one had to sit out at any time. How was that handled in the dressing room?
Yeah, it was really difficult. I honestly think any other team would have found it more difficult than we seem to do. I actually was speaking to JB about how seamless that was, really, given the enormity of the decision, with the ever-changing captains and the ever-changing team. And I think one thing that the group did really well was just sort of like constantly adapt. And it was like, well, whatever team we play, we can do a job and we can come out with the victory. Whereas, in other teams, I feel like that might have been more noise and, just throwing you off task a bit, really. I mean, it was tough for Danae, especially the first time she sort of sat out. But then credit to her, she was really good after that and just sort of got around the group. And I guess you hurt the first time that news gets passed on, but then she quickly sort of turned her head to what the team needed, which I think was great, and credit to her for that. But I think on the overseas front, it was one of those things where I feel like a lot of people signed that 4th wild card as a bit of an injury cover, which I guess in the Oval's case, that was the situation initially, but equally it sort of turned out to be a scenario whereby you could just do matchups and what you needed more of and stuff like that. So I think we actually ended up using it to our advantage, and it might be something that's used a bit more like that moving forward, where it's like, okay, well, if we need to play an extra, all-rounder that can bowl, then we go with this. If we just need a batter, then we go with this person, rather than it be as definitive as just an injury cover.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. You had a brilliant campaign from a personal point of view. You got 71 not out in the opener in a big chase. I think you're fourth in the run charts overall, averaging 50. What would you put your form down to?
I feel like that's the most common question I've had at the minute, actually. I honestly don't think I've played this way all summer. I think it's just one of those things where it hasn't been in the headlines and for England, so it seems like something significantly changed. But actually, it's just been a real continuation of sort of how I've been going, like when I've played for England A or domestically. Yeah, I think I've just really enjoyed my cricket. I've just sort of simplified it, probably not listened to too much external noise and too many different sort of voices, or I haven't set massive goals. I haven't chased statistics in terms of even in play, like in a power play or anything like that. I've just tried to keep it really simple and just get as many as you can as quick as you can, and sometimes that's quicker than others, and sometimes that comes off and sometimes it doesn't, but just sort of having that same process each game. So I don't think it's something that's necessarily a switch that's flicked just for the 100. I do feel like I have played like that a lot this summer. But it's nice to do it at that level, like it is different sort of punching out runs domestically. Whereas it's nice to do it sort of in a much more high profile and much more pressurized environment.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's this summer particularly. I guess maybe what's nice about that is it's come having been what you last played for England at the end of the winter.
Yeah.
I guess did you feel you had a point to prove, and also how has the communication been with sort of the England setup about what you need to do to win a recall and that sort of thing?
No, I don't necessarily. I've honestly really detached from this whole like point to prove scenario, because it's just not served me all that well, to be honest. I think I just try too hard when I'm in those scenarios, and like when I came back from the World Cup, I had a massive meltdown. Just bubble life and cricket life and everything was just all a bit too much, to be honest. I just couldn't quite cope with normal life when I came home. And since then, I just tried to balance myself within cricket a lot better. I've sort of changed the way I train and operate in terms of like, I've always got to do more, or I need to hit millions of balls or whatever, and turn my focus more on distracting myself from cricket and spend time with my friends and family and go and do things that I enjoy outside of the game, rather than just constantly being consumed by cricket. And I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to hit more balls. So outside of games, I've probably actually trained less than I ever have, but trained much more smartly, and more freely. But yeah, like in terms of like the communication with England, I guess until the 100, I probably didn't have a huge amount of I guess evidence that I'm in good nick. I think sometimes the domestic sort of structure, when the England players aren't playing in particular, isn't always a measure as to where you are in the pecking order internationally, amongst the England team. But I think obviously with with the 100, it gives you a bit better scope of where you're at. And obviously missing out on I was disappointed to miss out on T20 selection. I'm certainly not going to hide from the fact that I was, or deny the fact that I was disappointed. I haven't actually had conversations as yet, but I have asked to have those conversations moving forward to get a little bit of clarity on just, I know I've been out of favour since the World Cup, but is the door shut, or is the door jarred for now but could open again, and all that sort of stuff, really.
I guess it's a tricky situation as well, because there'll be a new head coach soon, I suppose. So there's a lot of stuff in a bit of limbo, I guess. I just wanted to ask quickly about one thing you said there. What's your main sort of switch off activity? What do you do when you're getting away from cricket? What's the one thing that's like, I'm going to do this and not think about it, if that makes sense?
I've just made a real effort to use my days off with time with, just come home to family, walk my dog, go play golf, get a coffee. I've just sort of like ripped up the script of what I used to do and do things a bit differently. Even just little things like on a game day, I'd be like, I've just got to chill and rest and whatever. Can't do much on a game day. But actually then, it's like my mind's just consumed by the game before I get to the ground. So even just changing pre-match and actually be busy, and you don't need to sit and think about the game before it occurs. Just go for coffee, go meet people, go meet your friends or your family that are coming to watch or whatever. I think cricket just got really heavy for me, and it just feels really light and really enjoyable again, and that's probably why I've played closer to my potential this last little while than I have done previous to that.
I've got a few questions just about the 100 sort of more generally. One of them kind of related to what you've sort of touched on already, which is just how much is it a lot easier, do you feel, for any player to sort of make a case for international selection now because of the platform the 100 gives you? As you say, in the past with domestic cricket, you can get all the runs, but there's been questions about the quality and about how closely it mirrors sort of the international environment and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you feel like
I think the 100's certainly as good as, you've got half the team are internationals, aren't they? Or they're pretty close to playing international cricket. I think if you look at most of the batting orders, people don't generally get past 5. And you've sort of got 4 or 5 gun bowlers that do a bulk of the work. So I think the standard's certainly up there. I think, like you say, just the fact that you're playing in front of 15, 20,000 live on Sky, I guess creates more pressure than what domestic cricket would do. I think it's no different to county cricket in the men's game. It's one of those things where it's like when all the England players are fit and available, the standard is very good. But obviously you have games throughout the year where people have been rested, or there's overlap and things like that. So I certainly think the 100 for women's cricket especially has bridged that gap massively.
And how have you found the almost sort of celebrity aspect of it, the way that when a game finishes there will be hundreds of kids there sort of wanting an autograph and a photo and that sort of thing, which I guess you might have got for England a few times, but to get that regularity and for that sort of thing, that is that a new thing that you feel like?
Yeah, I certainly feel like the engagement is a lot. I think that's the thing that I've really loved this year is obviously we weren't in bubbles and stuff, so you can engage with the crowds, you can engage with even people that are in your hotels and stuff that are coming to watch the games. Sign stuff for kids and all that sort of stuff is so important. And I think it's something that's part of the game that I always really enjoy, because it's like, well, I was that little kid at one point, and that's what inspired me was, the cricket. Like I remember watching Headingley when I was a youngster, and I loved Alex Stewart because he gave me the time of day and signed up my shirt and my little miniature bat and whatever. And I think, that's what's been really enjoyable this summer about the 100 is that it feels more, I don't know, it just feels more real, doesn't it? And more authentic and more together with the people who are coming to watch. And like, it's certainly better for a player. And it's got to be better for the people who are coming to watch as well, to be able to interact with the players a bit more.
Yeah, there's been some suggestion from those who sort of aren't fans of the 100, particularly often those who don't like its effect on the men's game, that the same success in the women's game could have been achieved by just sort of investing in the Kia Super League, I guess. Is that something you have an opinion on?
Yeah, I don't really believe that to be the case, because I think what's been really good for the 100 is that it's like an event, in terms of you've got the double headers and you've got the music, and it's a real event. There's a genuine atmosphere. I think if you had standalone fixtures with the Super League, and even like international cricket, it's rare that you get as many people to a women's international T20 50 over game as you do to the 100. So, yes, that money could have easily benefited the Super League, but I don't think it would have had as big an impact as what the 100's had. I don't know. I even, like my mum's comes to watch me to support me, but she's not a cricket nuffy. But she loves the 100 because she's like, well, it's like a day out. It's a real event, it's a great atmosphere. And I guess the purists don't like the fact that it is that, but attracting new audiences or people who aren't just diehard cricket fans, like my mum, much rather go to 100 game and have like a day out and a double header and all that sort of, all the, I guess, production that comes with it.
Yeah, and finally, how does the quality compare in terms of the actual cricket, not just to the KSL as we've discussed, but to sort of other competitions around the world, do you think?
Yeah, I think the standard's really good. I think a lot of what people have, say, for example, some of the Aussies that have come over and played, they've found that that just solely because the crowds are better, that it feels more pressurized. I don't think the standard's far behind at all in terms of, or even whether it's even behind at all in terms of like Big Bash comparisons. The crowds are certainly bigger, that's for sure. And I think the other thing in the women's game, there's so many tight games, where naturally that's just pressure, isn't it? And pressure creates a standard, because that's the standard is risen by the amount of pressure that's been applied by the games, and that was certainly a lot of close games. You got bowlers trying to defend very few runs at the back end, or you've got teams that have, we've had some big chases as well. So I think that the standard's been really good. I think it's definitely gone up from last year with the boost of more availability for the overseas. And I just think, the nature of the shortness of the game creates really close, high pressure games.
We are going to try and, if not answer, at least discuss 4 questions about the tournament. We're going to try and discuss: is it good? Is it
bad?
Is it good? Is it working? What is the effect it's having on everything else? And what comes next, I think.
Time for me to go and get a coffee, I think.
No, you're
No.
integral to this, Phil. So we'll start with trying to answer, is it good? Trent Rocket won the men's title. Oval Invincibles defended their title in the women's competition. Rockets won that final match without anyone getting to 20. what makes them good as a team? Is it all Andy Flower? Is it just Milan and Hales being brilliant at the top of the order? What is it that makes them good?
Well, I think those are the two big things. I think Hales and Milan scored about half their runs off the bat over the course of the competition, and when you have two of the best openers in the country and they're both in form, that's obviously going to be very helpful, particularly when they sort of complement each other pretty nicely, as Hales and Milan seem to. I think they're a pretty tough pair to bowl at, and then in the final, both of them obviously. Well, I think Milan top scored with 19 at a run a ball, but it's failed compared to their previous efforts in the competition. But Andy Flower sort of followed his teams since he became a coach in franchise leagues. Have followed a very similar blueprint where he's stacked them full of all rounders. Has lent very heavily on left-right combinations throughout the order. So you have weird stuff like Colin Munro came in at 6 in one game because Milan stayed in longer and they needed right-handers, and he also, so he ends up with teams with very long batting lineups and a lot of bowling options, which sort of inherently seems pretty good. There's a lot of variety in the attack. Even when they lost, they've sort of had Shamsi and Rashid Khan sharing one spot in the competition, but both of those guys dropped out for the final. Rashid was at the Asia Cup and Shamsi was left early for the CPL, which I suppose we'll come on to the point about overseas availability, but then they had Matt Carter come in off the bench. And
biggest feet I've ever seen, Matt Carter.
He's a big guy, isn't he?
Clown feet. Classic clown
big
feet.
Head.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
quite a intimidating stare. As well. There's a kind of dead-eyedness.
There's a 1,000-yard Nam stalwart sort of stare to
He loves shooting, he said in his Cricketers Who See profile, which didn't come as a great surprise. I think he's talking about animals. But
it's got a Full Metal Jacket element to it for me.
For some reason as well, on the TV graphics, when they had the lineups for the teams, they had everyone's like a full head, and for him it was just like eyes upwards for some reason.
Sam Cooke,
the
most underrated cricketer on God's earth.
I think that's Paul Walter, isn't it? But
Tall Paul.
Yeah,
it's definitely an Essex player. Pick your Essex player.
But yeah, they were a really good side, and I think probably the right winners as well. There was a sort of weird clubby quality to Manchester Originals throughout the whole thing, where they lost all the good players. Then Paul Walter got the beers in and nominated himself as social secretary, and they kept on winning, which was sort of a nice story in a sense. But then, with the weirdness of the 100 is that there's very little coverage of the cricket itself, and there's a lot of people criticising the quality, and there's a lot of people looking at the bigger picture all the time, as we're about to do. And I think when you have a nice story like that, but no one's really writing the story and are instead looking at it as, hang on, is Josh Little really the best bowler in the world? It probably made more sense, or it felt like a more fitting winner for Trent Rockets, who were clearly the best team, rather than the sort of feel-good story who came up on the outside. But no one was really telling it.
Yeah. So this is the question I have about whether the 100 is good: is how much is it sport and how much is it entertainment? I think we should talk about. I think Welsh Fire maybe sum this up, because obviously they've been very, very bad this year and last year, and partly, I mean, that is an issue from an entertainment point of view. If you have one team who are just going to lose all their games and not get very close, that is bad. But also, kind of, apart from that, whose job is it to say Welsh Fire have been bad, therefore lots of things need to change? Maybe Gary Kirsten needs to go. There needs to be repercussions for this. Does anyone care? Is it someone at the ECB? And if there isn't someone, what does that mean for it as sort of a sporting contest? If it's kind of like a bit shrug your shoulders, it's kind of bad for the kids who are coming in, but there's not much beyond that.
It's a good question, that, actually.
So as I understand it, basically, I was digging around working out what was going to happen with Gary Kirsten, because
What's the
obviously
jeopardy?
he's had I think they won their first 2 games last year thanks to Bairstow, and then they won 1 in the rest of the comp, and then they've lost everything this year. So he's had a pretty terrible time as coach. And I was digging around trying to work out, if he were to lose his job, who would actually be the person, who would be pulling the trigger on the shotgun. And from what I can tell, basically each of the 100 teams, because they're owned by the ECB effectively, but then delegated to these sort of team boards that no one really understands, there is a sort of non-exec board level director from each of the teams involved. So Somerset, Gloucestershire and Glamorgan. Somerset, by the way, probably want Welsh Fire to be quite bad, and it's sort of ironically. But I think so. Mark Wallace, who's the director of cricket or general manager or something along those lines at Welsh Fire, would be the man making those decisions, and probably as a sort of proud Glamorgan man, would want Welsh Fire to do pretty well and would have our best interests at heart. But it's difficult then to know, if maybe Wallace has been the guy who's at fault, because no one's really sure how this all works. And in that case, do the ECB then fire him and the coach, or do they keep the coach and fire Wallace? How does it all work?
Or do the ECB fire themselves?
Yeah, well, exactly. And then, at what point, if Welsh-Fire are terrible for 2 more years, do the ECB sort of fall on their sword and say, actually, maybe cricket in Cardiff doesn't work, there's no crowds, the team's terrible, we'll just move it to Bristol? And I can't really see that happening next year, for example, or the year after, but there probably does need to come a time where there's some kind of jeopardy involved for a team, because I don't know. I don't think it helps the league at all to have a terrible team. I suppose the flip side of it is that they can have a big clear out. They'll have the first pick in the draft, and if they get some picks right or whatever, then we saw from London Spirit this year, you can turn it around pretty quickly, especially if you happen to get a couple of wins at the start of the competition. There is randomness in short form cricket. Then suddenly they might come mid-table next year, and we wonder what the fuss was all about.
Do you think it kind of sums up the inauthenticity of the whole thing that we're talking about? Should this team even exist? Because in sport there are bad teams make sport. Barney Ronay touched on this in a column he wrote, saying Welsh Fire being rubbish is about the best thing about the 100, because at least it's a sporting story that we can be familiar with, rather than pretending that the Trent Rockets fans are delighted. Well, there aren't that many Trent Rockets fans, let's be honest. Should they not just be allowed to be bad? Is that not just how leagues develop? And at some point they won't be bad, and that will be a story because they're no longer bad. That feels fine to me. And the fact that it doesn't sit well with a lot of people kind of sums up that this is such a kind of construct rather than a kind of a league in the raw, that that they've done things badly which they could do better and then become a better team. That seems fine to me.
I think that's probably right, and I think also it's probably quite fitting that it's Welsh Fire as well, because of the fact that they're playing at this venue that is quite unusual, but because of the fact Glamorgan have done very badly in the Blast, they've not picked any Glamorgan players because there's no standouts, and I think they only had 2 players involved in the whole competition. So they've not really got anyone who has the knowledge of the home ground advantage of having played 50 games at Sapphire Gardens and done well, because there aren't really any of those players. The crowds have been pretty poor compared to the rest of the competition, and I think people, to be honest, have probably stayed away partly because towards the end of the competition, because of the fact they'd seen what had happened and there was no jeopardy on the final few games. And it feels like Welsh Fire was always sort of the outlier, them being I suppose probably the least obvious choice of a venue as well. Out of the 8, I would say there was probably a perfectly strong case to share that team around between maybe hosted at Bristol, or maybe have a few games at Bristol, a few games in Wales, and call them Wisden or something like that. But instead they sort of doubled down on the Welsh thing, had no Welsh players, had no Glamorgan players, and have been terrible. And they do seem, I would say, just it's probably quite lazy analysis, but they seem the least sort of cohesive team and the most artificial team out of the 8, I would say.
I think the flip side to this is maybe in the women's competition, where you have Oval Invincibles and Southern Brave are both so clearly so much better than the other teams. I think one question I kind of have is, how have they built such good teams? I mean, it's supposed to be sort of a draft system that meant all the teams would be broadly equal, and that kind of hasn't happened. You look down both of them, you're like, not at all surprised that they have contested both finals. And in a similar way to Welsh Fire, but is how good they are an issue? Will people be turned off if it's those two in the final every year? Or is that just, as Joe says, like maybe in English sport as well, we're a bit more open to this. We like teams actually building up dominance over several years, and we like that to mean something the next year and the year after as well, which is different to other countries where they sort of like it just to be not random, but to there be more of a level playing field and the field to be leveled between seasons.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think it's a massive problem. I think it, actually last year it was quite helpful in a way that Southern Brave, who people had tipped pre-tournament to do well, ended up winning it, because people could say, oh, Southern Brave, they're really good. They're the team with, the gun bowling attack or whatever it was. And I felt like that was a good sort of way for people to identify with the team early on, where they knew who they were, they thought they were going to be good, and they ended up being good, and they were proven right. And it sort of helps the tournament stand on its own feet, because I don't think a lot of people would have a strong idea about what Northern Superchargers are like, for example, and they wouldn't say, oh, they're the team that do this. They would just say that they're playing purple. I think in the women's comp, I wouldn't be surprised. I think there's been a few whispers around having a sort of more sort of open draft style system, so making it closer to the men's in terms of how it's done, because it's very much been under the table recruitment type stuff where the salaries are published and people directly negotiate with players, but rather than you saying I'm up for grabs, someone come and get me. It's much more speaking to regional directors, that sort of thing. And clearly, if you look at the Southern Brave team, there's a huge crossover between the Southern Brave team and the Southern Vipers team, and there's a big draw to play, in London. So Oval Invincibles have done well, and under your coach that you know already and you live nearby, so that's why Southern Brave have done well. It feels like, in terms of, I don't know whether that's a massive problem personally. I think that's absolutely fine if there are good teams.
And things can change so quickly, right? I remember actually this time last year getting an email in from a listener saying, is the fact that Southern Brave are so dominant in the men's competition a problem? Are they just going to win it every year? And what, they were one off bottom, were they? Or two off bottom? So, these things change very, very quickly in T20. I agree. I think they could do it a bit. I think a more transparent recruitment process would definitely be beneficial. Just for the whole kind of validity of the tournament, really. But yeah, I like having good teams, and if someone beats them, then it's an upset, and we know it's an upset. I think that's a nice narrative to have.
Yeah, and relatedly, if players are coming and going constantly, as we've seen this year, which is problematic, if you have players of the quality of Shamsi and Rashid Khan, albeit one plays for his country, fine, that should obviously take precedence, but the other one chooses to go and play in another equivalent domestic tournament, and if we've seen many players over the first 2 years of the tournament saying thanks but no thanks, then you're going to get that constant flux anyway, right, between one side and another. And so patterns of supremacy are going to be harder and harder to map out over a period of time, because the makeup of the teams are going to be so randomised. That in itself is obviously problematic. In an ideal world, the ECB would be able to convince the players from Stokes and Bairstow to Topley to Shamsi that this is a key part of your season. Well, at the moment, the sense is, it's hard to shake, that players aren't really prioritising the tournament. Certainly, certain players, if they think that they can get away with not playing in it, then that's what they're going to do. And in the end, not in the end, but I think one of the key things going forward will be, can they hold on to the quality? Can they hold on? Can they make this a magnet for quality around the world? And the jury, I would say, has got to be out on that, right?
Well, I thought that watching the men's final, looking at the sides beforehand, looking at the way the game played out, an exciting finale, I thought it just seemed like a decent blast game, really. I don't think that Trent Rocket side without Rashid Khan or Shamsi, I think that would be a good game against Notts, really, a full strength Notts side. I know they have crossovers, so that wouldn't really work, and that, for me, that's fine. But they promised so much more that I watched that final, even though it was exciting at the end. I think that was almost exciting through lack of quality rather than almost quality.
Parodic, wasn't it, that you have Gleeson running into Gregory in the finale of this game on a stodgy pitch at Lords. These two kind of archetypes of county
flag
cricket,
bearers
really.
for the Blast, right?
Yeah,
They've made their name in that.
Yeah.
I thought it felt quite sort of end of season CB40 final. The vibe of that game, and at the end, it was very, pretty tough pitch, quite cold outside in September, all this stuff, and every boundary suddenly a huge release of pressure because of the fact that rates sort of climbing, but not climbing very high.
Yeah, within all of the understandable scepticism, and it's very, very hard to watch that game and keep your cynicism at the door. Even then, and this can apply when you're walking through a park on a Sunday afternoon and you see a game of cricket and you happen to catch, you don't know who's playing, but you see the scoreboard and you say, all right, they need 60 off 48 and they've got 6 wickets in that. Oh, I might sit down and watch this. And then suddenly you're into the game. I was really into that game, despite not giving a toss who won or lost, and also the sense, by the way, which is problematic in itself. I'm not sure how much the players really cared either. There was a sense of mild jeopardy, but nothing more than that. I don't think you bleed for your Trent Rockets in the way that you bleed for Notts or whichever club it is that you've been reared through and brought up on, and so on and so on.
I saw this take after the final, and I disagree with it in terms of the body language of the players and what players have said throughout the competition. And obviously, they're not going to be, if you've got someone who's being paid 125k for 8 games, he's not going to lay into the tournament. I understand that, but I do think, in the same way that Lancashire were gutted after losing the Blast and it had to be dragged off the pitch or whatever. It kind of felt the same with Manchester Originals. Gleeson sort of sunk down to his haunches. Laurie Evans gave this big sort of rousing team talk in the huddle where he said, look, guys, this doesn't define us. We'll come back stronger next year. And obviously some of them might not be there next year because that's the nature of the tournament. But I didn't really feel that there was somehow a huge difference between that and any given Blast final, where I think the team that won were pretty happy and started celebrating, and the dugout all rushed on and they lifted the trophy. And I think the team that lost were pretty gutted about it. And maybe the scars won't last as long for Manchester Originals in the final compared to what they did in Lancashire in the Blast. But I do still think the players care.
Yeah, okay. I don't dispute any of that. That comparison though, if you're playing for Lancashire, then you know that there's many thousands of people who are invested in that result. And Lancashire, despite being a great white ball side, have won one white ball tournament in the 21st century. So you have all of that history as well. And then, of course, you have the storied history going even further back. And then you know that you are representing a whole region of proud, great cricket. And then if you don't win that game, you don't get over the line, then surely that's a deeper, more scarring experience.
Yeah, it might well be.
Which is not to say that people are walking away, immune by any stretch,
Yeah, and I think also there is maybe a problem for the competition in terms of the lack of scrutiny on bad performances.
Right,
so I think,
right.
For example, Welsh Fire lost. There was not a lot of stuff other than the occasional sort of satirical piece like the one in the Guardian you mentioned, saying here's why Welsh Fire were so bad this year. There was just a lot of, Welsh Fire are terrible. Not a lot of, Tom Banton and Joe Clark were two of the biggest picks in the draft and didn't score a run between them.
Yeah. And just to round up that point, I was still gripped by the game. Yeah. Ridiculous as it is, I was still gripped by the game, and intrigued by how this slightly shambolic attempt at a top-class game of cricket was going to play out.
I've got two last things on the final and then on the quality overall. And so one on the final, we've all mentioned the pitch, and it wasn't a great pitch. And Lords actually has produced a few sort of dud pitches in a few different ways over the last few years. That's something to keep an eye on. But Joe, you watched the final with your friends, and I wondered what they made of it, having not been that into cricket beforehand and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I was watching, I was around my mates for barbecue and needed to watch this for, because I wanted to and professional reasons. So I basically made two mates who don't watch cricket at all to watch the final. One comes to a few T20s here just to get pissed in the office, really, and another pays no attention whatsoever. So I was quite interested what their take would be on it. And one said, they're both related to the kind of commentary, actually. And I'll be watching on the BBC, it's important to add. The one said there was constant talk about the Trent Rockets fans being kind of in dreamland and all this kind of stuff. And he was just like, well, how can they be? They didn't exist a year and a half ago. What is this thing? And I think that was a concern that people had, and it was interesting. That was the first thing he picked up on. The other one is the one who watches a tiny bit of cricket with me every now and again, I think found the BBC coverage patronising and dumbed down to points. So he was saying, I want to hear about seam and spin and stuff, which he doesn't really understand, but he knows it's an interesting thing about the game, which kind of helps to reveal the game. And it really struck me, the BBC particularly, and I think they've kind of pigeonholed themselves in a quite uncomfortable way here, where they're just relentlessly asking each other who's winning. And that's such a boring question in cricket. And anyone who follows cricket knows that's not a very simple question to answer anyway. And just watch it unfold. So I find that grating, but I thought it was interesting that someone who doesn't even follow cricket thought that it was being spoon-fed in a way that actually wasn't particularly appealing. And you're losing some of the mysteries which actually bring people into the game rather than put them off. I thought Tamal Mills was an interesting example. He's a really good commentator. He's much better on Sky. There was one point where he started talking about something a bit technical and then pulled himself back because I think they've been given instructions not to go that way. And I think that's a mistake. And yeah, I think they should give their audience a bit more credit, really. If they want people to actually know cricket for what it is and stay with the game, then you've got to show them what it is.
Mm.
Yeah, I echo that. And also, let's be real about it. This is the final of a tournament, and famously people are rather polarising on it, but it's Saturday night BBC Sport, and so a lot of the people who are going to be watching that are going to be people who know the game relatively well anyway, right? And we're kidding ourselves if we think there's just these hordes of newbies around the block. The vast majority of people who will be watching that game, whatever the numbers are, they will be people who have at least some handle on a game of cricket, because otherwise you'd be doing something else with your Saturday night. I think you're absolutely right with that, Joe. One or two things that struck me about their coverage, the BBC's coverage as well. I know that they pushed hard to have the player mics, and I think there was some pushback elsewhere in the whole setup. But I know the BBC wanted that quite hard, and thought Tom Lammonby came across brilliantly in the field and actually really added something to the show by getting a sense of the tension out there on the pitch, but also his particularly unique way of fielding as well. I don't know if you caught that, but he even when he's at deep cover, he's on the angle. Did you catch this, Joe? So he's on the angle like a kind of baseball pitcher, but he's obviously fielding, and he feels like it gives him an extra half a yard to attack the ball. So he's already on that front foot rather than just being square on, and he learnt that from Chris Jordan and so on, and he's a brilliant fielder, Lammonby. But he described the atmosphere, the tension building and so on. I thought that really added something to it.
Yeah, and for me, as like a sports, like maybe this is me as a sports nerd, and that's what gets me interested, but with other sports that I don't follow too much, like say with baseball, I don't know anything about it, but actually what will drag me into it, like to finding out a bit more, is seeing like a weird technical thing that someone is doing that I like, that is like, oh wow, that's cool. Like there was a thing that Cameron Ponsonby, who's been in the podcast before, noted that I can't remember which of the teams, but were doing when Alice Capsey was batting to spin. So they had, because obviously you have the fielders outside the ring, they had the fielder stationed at a cover, I think, right on the ring, but they knew that Alice Capsey liked to come down and sort of chip over the top, not sort of go for six, but try and chip it and run two. So as soon as the ball was bowled, the field at that point turned and started running to try and get the ball back, and that's the kind of thing I think that, like, if you notice that and point it out and then explain why that's all happening in terms of what the bowler's doing, what the batter's doing, what the fielder's doing, why the fielder can't just start out there. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that will get someone actually into the minutiae of the game and actually make them like, okay, there's lots more going on here, rather than just someone's trying to hit it as hard as possible and they're trying to, stop them from doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, indeed. I think there was a sense that they were almost underselling it a little bit, almost apologising for its complexities. And you should be embracing those things, I think. It did show you just how polished, and you'd expect this, that Sky's coverage would be polished compared to the BBC's, which is a different kind of broadcast and obviously a more raw and developing show. But the fact that NASA looked down the lens after the final game and said there is an element of second season syndrome to this, and that while the women's game has been uniformly great, there are some issues around some of the things that we're talking about here, about player retention, about the lack of close games, about some of the intensity and the quality, and so on and so on. There was a lack of that journalistic rigour, I thought, on the BBC, and perhaps they can address that maybe next year. It was actually, now I think about it, it was crystallised by the interview that they did with Milan afterwards, where they did it with a chap called Chris Hughes, I think he's called. Mm-hmm. Seems like a lovely fella. But it was, they just spoke about Ryan Gosling for 20 seconds. Too much Ryan Gosling. I want to know that he's leading run scorer in the tournament, England's number 3, a world-class short format player. I wanted a journalist to ask him some questions. And again, it seemed to be indicative of a slightly infantile approach.
This is your come and get me plea, Phil.
Oh, I mean, she knows. Don't worry about that.
Right, I think that's quite enough on is it good. I think the next sections will be shorter, I imagine. On is it working, I think there were some stats that came out on viewership, attendances, etc. They were all roughly equal to 2022, a few small drops here, a few big rises there. I think the shorter women's competition probably does play into that, which means you probably can't say it's a fair comparison. And the one big jump was in the average attendance of women's games. We had a question from Paul Hudson, who mentioned that NASA sort of discussion, as you said, Phil. And he asks, do you think the women's 100 could have been successful on its own, or could continue to be successful if the men's 100 dies, or are the two, do they have to be just tied together, do you think?
I think that, I suppose that the precedent is probably the WBBL in Australia, which has gone from something similar where you had a lot of double-header games to a standalone tournament at the beginning of the summer. But the BBL is just so much more established than the 100 is currently. Personally, could you have done the, this is the classic sort of counterfactual, is, could we just have funded the KSL? And realistically, I think that the fact that those competitions are interlinked, and much as we sort of there aren't very many Trent Rockets Ultras, there weren't a lot of Manchester Originals fans booking their last minute coach from Southampton to London on the night. But people at home venues have got behind the teams to a certain extent, and are fans of the teams, do come in for the women's game and watch the women's game when they can after work, if that's what it is. I think the alignment is a crucial thing, and the stat that stood out for me during the final was I actually thought the women's final was by no means the best game of the competition. The pitch didn't help. And I think your point about Lords is right. I wouldn't have the 100 finals day at Lords. There's a reason the Blast finals day has never been there, and I think Saturday showed why. But there were 20,000 at that game, and I think the whole KSL in 2019 had 27,000 there. And obviously, there's a huge difference in the amount of marketing and publicity. But a 34-game tournament had that, and one single game in this one had the other. And it's I think they're chalk and cheese. And I think it maybe you'll get to a point where the competition split off, and then maybe you can have the conversation about, well, do we actually need the men's competition? But I think the two at the moment need each other. We saw at the start of the season, the men's comp was, I thought, a lesser thing because of the fact that if there's not really much of a buzz or an atmosphere until 60 balls into the men's game, then you're actually relying on it being a close finish for there to be any kind of atmosphere in the run chase. Because I went to the opening night at the Aegeus Bowl, which sort of famously slow to fill up because there's a bottleneck and it's hard to get to and all that sort of thing. And, it was 20 for 3 after the power play and the game was completely dead. And there was a bit of a buzz in the run chase when Vince was scoring some runs, because there always is. But that was about it, really. It was, there was not a lot of atmosphere.
That first game, watching that on TV.
It was tough. Yeah, it was a tough watch.
But then day 2, you came here.
Yeah.
Preponderance of internationals and a really good game of cricket in the
but
London Derby.
I think if you'd had the women's game before the first game, then at least you would have had people at least, vaguely excited by the fact the team was taking wickets in the first innings, which you just didn't on the first night. Yeah. So I think they need each other at this point in their evolution.
Joe, do we yet know what it looks like for the 100 to be a success? Does this, extended TV deal, I think, does that mean it already is? Or is it only going to be in 20 years when you have someone opening the batting for England and Ashes Test who says they were a child of the 2019 summer or whatever, or the 2021 summer, or whatever it is? What does it mean for the 100 to work, basically?
Well, given the targets are around participation, future-proofing the game, securing its financial future, I don't see how we can possibly know other than get little glimpses for quite a long period of time, really. I think what we'll see before whether we know that the 100 is a success, I think we'll see the impact on county cricket and the rest of cricket. And for a lot of people, that will mean that it's a failure immediately. Whether it achieves its goals or not, if the rest of county cricket suffers, for a lot of cricket fans, that means it's failed. The ECB might well see it differently. As ever with 100, it depends on your perspective. But yeah, in short, I don't think we'll know for quite a long time if it's achieved its aims.
As someone who probably knows county cricket better than anyone at the moment, what are your thoughts on the overall health of county cricket? Do you have concerns around the way?
I've spoken about this a little bit over the last few years, obviously lockdown and all that sort of stuff, and you do a lot of podcasts. And for me, it's about what the ECB in England want to prioritise. So, for years we were a poor white ball side, and we were a really good test side, but they were prioritising test cricket. And then over the last however many years, winning the World Cup, the build-up to that, we prioritised white ball cricket, so test cricket sort of had a bit of a stumbling block. So it's whichever way they want to go, and I know Keezy very well, and he's all for making our test side as strong as possible. So I'm guessing we'll see a bit of a change where there'll be more test cricket in the penultimate part of the year. So, for instance, this year, there was this test series against South Africa. How many 4-day games were there for the lads to play in before the test series? Yeah. They've jumped straight from white ball cricket to 2020 cricket straight into test cricket, which is, you can't do that. If you're going to be successful, you just can't. A successful test team or county team, you just can't do it. You got to play county cricket in the middle of the summer. So I think we'll see a bit of a change there, and it wouldn't even surprise me if there's test cricket throughout the 2020 next year and the 100. I think they might mix it up, or have it the 2020 a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Well, the white ball stuff's quite interesting, isn't it? The 50 over, what they're going to do with that, because is it going to be 50 over forevermore? Is it going to be a 50 over World Cup, or are they going to change it? Will they bring it down to 40 overs or 45 overs? Who knows? Looking back over my years, I think the 40 over comp was probably the best comp I've played in. As much as this year's been great in the 50, but actually, I don't know. Yeah, I feel that it was a little bit more. There was no real pause in the game. It was like constantly, it was always going, and the intensity was always high. Where you feel like, 50 over cricket, I suppose people are looking at it and go, actually, well, it's a skill to do it, to knock it around for another 10 overs. But the way cricket's going, it's all about foot down and don't stop. It's all about run rates going up, and you look at Test cricket now, the way the old Bazball and all that sort of stuff is going. It's they're going at 4-5 and over in Test cricket. It's just bonkers. So whereas I think if you scrapped the 50 over and brought it down to 40 over comp, I think you could see some massive scores with the how the intensity's going in white ball cricket.
Yeah, and the 100 in general. Are you concerned about the impact it's having on county cricket and may continue to have in the future?
I think it'll be what it'll be. It might be amazing and it might kick off, but last year there was a big buzz about it. I couldn't really come to terms with it. My boys love it. I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and like they play the 100 in the garden every day. They've got the little app that they put the scores in on their phone, and I think. But this year, I don't know. There just wasn't that. There didn't seem like big hype about it and much of a buzz. So I don't know. It could fade out. 5 years, mate, might be gone. Who knows? Or I don't know. They might change it up next year somehow and try and spice it up again. But actually, one thing I will say about it, and if it just, I'm sure it's obviously there's another 3 years left of it as a contract, but what they need to do is they need to find a way of these boys that are being picked and not playing and sitting on the sidelines. For instance, I use Jack, good mate of mine, Jack Leaning, playing for Kent now. He's going into this game today. He's had 5 weeks sitting on his backside. Unfortunately, obviously, he was hoping to play and we want him to play, but he's not played any cricket. He's had a few throws in the nets, and when he has, if he's going to play, he's going to be trying to hit it out the ground for ball one. So that's all he's been practicing. So it's like, there should be some form of, if they've got a few days off, no cricket, well, why can't they come back to their county and play cricket for their county? It helps the club, but it helps them still to tick over as well. So if they do get picked, then at least they're playing a bit of cricket. So I think, they need to work around that and find a way for these lads that have been sitting around for a month, because it's middle of the summer. It's peak summer, and they're not playing any cricket at all. He's not going to moan because he'd have been playing more golf than cricket, but it's I just think that needs to be addressed, and just to keep these lads in a bit of form. But it helps out both sides, and it helps them, but it helps the counties as well, because obviously they're frustrated that these players are not they're not around. But if there's some mutual sort of ground where they can come back and play a few games through the one-day tournament, then so be it.
Yeah, I think it might help to appease the fans, Kent fans, wondering, well, if Jack Lean is not playing for them, why can't he play for us? Might be
exactly. Yeah, but that's for everybody as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've discussed it a bit already in terms of Welsh Fire actually not having a close link to Glamorgan, because it's pretty clear that there is quite a strong link between host counties and 100 teams. I think that was something that people were probably assured sort of wouldn't happen ahead of the 100 starting, that these would be completely separate things. You wouldn't be more likely to get a 100 deal if you went to Notts and that sort of thing. Is it an issue that this basically is clearly a thing? I mean, you might well get a young player who wants to play in the 100 moving from Leicestershire to Notts because they know that they'll link up to the Notts player. They'll be more likely to have that link to the ground that gets them into the team. Is that an issue, or is it just a thing?
Doesn't that apply across all formats, though, really? And if you are a player that has vaulting ambition, then you believe that you're going to be fast-tracked into an England side or an England Lions side or stand a better chance of winning certain things in Division 1 of the county championship if you move from a smaller club to a bigger club.
Maybe, I guess the question is whether it accentuates it to too great a degree, but it just might not.
I think the genie's out the bottle on that, personally.
I also think we've actually, because of the fact the Royal London Cup's been played at the same time as 100, I think we've seen a little bit of the other way as well, where some players have left, for example, Notts. You look at the players so Zach Chappell's leaving, I think Sol Buddinger's leaving, all the sort of fringe players seem to be going, where it feels like they can now be a senior player at, say, Derbyshire or Leicestershire or whoever it is, and therefore actually get a fuller season than they would if they're sort of stuck at Notts in the twos and playing for a second string team that's never going to win the Royal London Cup. Also, yeah, I don't know. I don't actually think it's been as big a problem as a lot of people maybe anticipated. So I think, for example, last year when Critchley was weighing up his options leaving Derbyshire, he was linked with Glamorgan because he'd been playing for Welsh Fire, and people said, well, you know, it seems like an obvious move. Is this a problem? And he ended up going to Essex because I think he decided that was a better move for him. Could play with Harman and play for a Div 1 team. And I think until you get to a point where you have a top division that is exclusively made up of 100 hosting teams, which we don't have at the moment, and I don't think we'll have for a little while yet, I don't think it's a major issue personally.
Okay. And then obviously the other big way it affects county cricket is just in terms of the schedule and how it squeezes everything else.
Schedule chat.
Yeah. And what the question I've written down is, are we ever going to be happy with it? There's reports that have come in the Telegraph about what it might look like from 2024 onwards. It looks like it could be the counties are pushing for the Blast we played on Fridays alongside county championship Sundays to Wednesdays. Maybe a 6-tier top division of the county championship with sort of 2 parallel tiers below it, where there's a playoff to get into that top tier. So that would be a shortened county championship overall. Are you still with me, Phil? I've got 3 questions based on these reports and the Strauss report.
Just 3?
Yeah. Well, the first is, would you be happy with the following very rough schedule? One Day Cup April, County Championship Blast until 100 starts, some sort of Red Bull thing alongside the 100, County Championship to finish the season. Then, would you like the Red Bull competition alongside the County Championship, alongside the 100 to be County Championship or something else? And if something else, what would you shorten to fit everything in?
Okay, I'll go very briefly.
Yes.
I like the idea of the One Day Cup early doors. It's the way they do it in Australia. I like that. It would kind of prioritise that, I think, and get everyone going in the early part of the summer. CC and the Blast to run together until the 100 starts works for me, for sure. I love the fact that the County Championship bookends the season. As I've said before, I'm really looking forward to the next 3 weeks in September. In an ideal world, we have some red ball cricket running through August, but to me, it's not the end of the world. And if we are concerned about, say, test match players such as, I don't know, Zach Crawley, there's a week and a half gap between the second and the third test and you wanted to have a game, then perhaps we can schedule some more Lions games in there or something like that. There's always a development side to play. There'll be a Sri Lanka development side over here, or you can play another game against South Africa tourists, and then they can use that as in the old days. But in terms of having county championship games through the 3 weeks of the 100 in August, I wouldn't want the county championship to be weakened, and it would have to be, because essentially the top 70 or 80 odd players, most of whom will cross over from white ball cricket into red ball cricket because they're the best players, most of whom at least, they wouldn't be playing in it. And that, to me, would weaken the integrity of the championship.
I can't see them playing championship cricket at the same time as 100.
No, and sorry, just very. And as for something else, as you say, an alternative red ball thing, no.
That seems like a bit of a red herring to me, I think. But so much of the review proposals are around the best versus the best, and you can't therefore have the Premier Red Ball competition being played at the same time as the 100 when you've got so many players missing. In theory, I like the idea of having the One Day Cup to open up the season. I think that would be a really bright way to start a season. But the problem is then you have county fans with nothing to watch of their counties during the 100. I just don't think that can stand. I think that is going to make an already precarious situation much, much worse. So, I mean, I actually don't see that you can tinker with what we've got. I don't think you can fundamentally change it too much. You've got this huge immovable object in the middle of the summer in the 100. That's not going anywhere. Everything else has to work around it from the ECB's point of view. They can shuffle the championship fixtures around with the Blast, maybe bring the Blast a bit earlier to give you a bit more championship cricket in the sort of height of summer, but these are relatively minor tinkering. I do fear with this review they're going to do all this and then it's actually going to look quite similar. Sure, they can play a few more Lions games, fine. I mean, Mark Ramprakash covered this in his column that this month for the magazine, that there's a lot of talk about the best be the best Lions coming back, high performance. Well, he was like, well, we had a high performance centre at Loughborough and they shut the whole thing down. He said it's like you have a government that puts loads of policies in place, and another government comes along and then they just wipe them out. In this case, it's the same government doing going back over these decisions. So I don't know. I don't envy Strauss, and I think we'll probably end up with something not too dissimilar to what we've actually got at the moment.
Yeah, I've always had a lot more sympathy for the people who put this shit show together than most do. Because no one will ever be entirely happy. No one will ever be entirely placated. But the one thing that people are going to have to accept is that big monolith in the middle that we've just spent 20 minutes deconstructing, well, that's there. That's there for the next few years at the very least. It may change its complexion. It may grow a wee bit. But that's there. And it has to work, or it has to be given the chance to work. And so, yeah, look, as Joe says, we can go round and round, but the reality is that people are doing the best they can, trying to squeeze 4 formats into a season that's traditionally only had 2.5.
Let's move on to what next quickly then. And this is something we've almost come close to discussing, but not quite. And it's the question around private ownership of franchise. Obviously, if someone is invested in Welsh Fire, they are going to care much more if Welsh Fire win or lose. They are literally invested in it. And
Ben Jones got any money?
We've also discussed overseas players and the lack of availability for them. One way to get the funds, which would allow you to attract the best and to keep them away from something like the Caribbean Premier League, would be to have private investment in. Matt, is this inevitable? Is it good? Would it be good? Is the model at the moment the right thing? Is it something we just need to wait and see?
It's really tough. I think the official line has always been no, these aren't for sale and won't be for the foreseeable future. I think if the right people came in with the right offers, if KKR decided tomorrow that they were going to buy Oval Invincibles and make them Oval Knight Riders, I'm pretty sure it would happen. But I don't know. It's very tricky. I think the problem, there's going to be a big problem at some point in the next couple of years where people wake up to the fact that it's quite monotonous to have Abu Dhabi Knight Riders, Trinbago Knight Riders, Kolkata Knight Riders, and they're all different enough that they're not KKR, but they're all the same enough that they are quite, that they become predictable and boring. And I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing for the ECB to have something a bit different. It's obviously, the whole IP of the 100 is clearly worth having in terms of as an asset. I think there's a reason Cricket Australia have for now resisted private investment in the Big Bash, although that's another discussion altogether. But I don't realistically think it's going to happen in the next couple of years. I think also with 8, the problem is potentially that actually finding 8 people to do that is quite difficult. I think there'll be a lot of buyers if they opened up a London team to private investment, but are they, realistically, are you going to get 8 different groups, all of whom are investing similar amounts of money, all of whom care the same amount, all of whom are happy to have the same amount of control over their teams? I'm not sure. And also you've got to think about what they'd actually be investing into, because at the moment the teams are sort of, it's a conversation between various board members at counties, and then a lot of the teams in the 100 are effectively WhatsApp chats. Like, what is Oval Invincibles for 11 months of the year? It's a WhatsApp chat between Solanke, Moody, a couple of analysts, a couple of assistant coaches, and maybe a director. That is all it is. So, it's quite expensive.
WhatsApp chat.
Yeah, WhatsApp chat if you're paying a few million quid for it. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it will happen at some point, probably, but I think that's a sort of a 3, 4, 5 years time thing rather than 2024, 2025.
Fine. Then final thing, and well done all of you for making it through in an increasingly warming commentary box, we should say as well.
Am I still here?
Yeah. I want one thing from each of you that you change about the 100, and I'm happy to go first if no one's jumping. So mine's about the ground experience and about the music that gets played, and it's just it's too often basically. And this is, it's not just me grumbling. I think there's a serious point here. So there was the game that Phil mentioned earlier, the Oval Invincibles first game at home was a brilliant game
against London Spirit. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and part of the reason why the ending was so good was because actually the chasing team were ahead in the game, but there were a few dot balls, which meant that there weren't boundaries, which are an opportunity to play music in. So because there were dot balls, you then had the crowd actually really more getting into it and engaging with it, and sort of like clapping the bowler in. Sort of that the pressure was actually building there in a way that it doesn't if there's a if it's boundaries and then it's like they're playing blinded by the lights or whatever it is. It
sounded so old then. That was great.
It dissipates, I think, a little bit of the organic crowd atmosphere that it can build up by wanting to have something distracting at all times. I think that's what I would change.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Joe, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm sort of repeating myself because I think I might have said it last week, but I think it's worth repeating in the wider conversation about how the 100 fits with county cricket. If you're signed up for a 100 franchise and you're not playing, you should be released to play for your county in the One Day Cup or whatever cricket is going on at that time. That's just got to happen straight away, and it's an easy fix and would make everyone feel slightly better about the situation.
I would change the recruitment. I would firstly chat to the CPL and make sure that they started slightly later, because I think that would be mutually beneficial. I would televise the draft because I think it's crap when it's done via press release and Zoom. And I would have a higher proportion of the players in each squad picked via a wildcard system. So you do it at the end of the blast group stages, maybe the bottom 3 in each squad rather than the bottom 1, which means that you don't get the ridiculous situation where Eskenazi is one of the best batters in the blast over the last 3 years, but no one wants him because they've already filled up their opening spots, and he makes a mockery of the One Day Cup by churning out hundreds every single day, which is what it felt like for most of August.
And Phil, finally from you.
Why are you smiling?
No, nothing. Partly because you were looking out the window entirely disengaged at the point when I asked the
question. I've been watching South Africa
you did it, Kevin Peterson there. You were just sort of whistling, but you were definitely looking out the window.
No, I was listening to what you were saying. I thought your answer was excellent, by the way, Matthew. I was not listening so much to yours, Joe, because you said it a couple of weeks ago. No, I was just watching them train up South Africa.
Okay.
Their bowlers are much better than their batsmen.
Yeah.
Is my hot take from watching them train today. Anyway, it was billed 2 years ago. Prize money's the equal for men and women. Isn't this an egalitarian tournament? This is a new way. But still, your best paid woman takes about 10% of your best paid man, and it repeats all the way down the line. That discrepancy remains to me pretty horrific when you think about how central the women's game has become to the success or otherwise of this thing. And for those who play in it to be paid basically 10% of what your average man is being paid, I think is shameful. But it does tap into a broader point that there is not very much money swirling around this thing. And if we want overseas players to be more persuaded to come and play and to, if you like, find that extra ounce of energy when they're feeling a bit knackered and a bit burnt out, and get them on that plane from Brisbane or Karachi or wherever it might be, then I'm afraid we do need a bit more money to come into it in the end, because at the moment the cold hard economics of it make the thing less appealing for cricketers than other franchise leagues out there. And in the end, I've always felt this right before the first ball was bowled, that this thing will thrive or fall on the quality of the stuff, the quality of the game in the end, and how big a pull it can be to bring in these exotic stars from all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Right then, and that's the 100. We never have to talk about it ever again. So there you go. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks, Matt, for joining us. You've been great. And if you did enjoy,
cheers, Matt, brilliant. Thank you.
If you did enjoy listening, please leave us a nice, maybe even a 5-star review on the app of your choice. Cheers.